The Rivera house glowed like a postcard that Christmas Eve, its windows lined with warm lights, wreaths on every door, and a towering inflatable Santa swaying gently in the front yard. Vanessa stepped out of the car and pulled her coat tighter around her. Not because of the cold, the Texas winter was mild, but because every visit here came with a familiar tightening in her chest. Daniel walked beside her, shoulders squared, the way he always did when he was back under his mother's roof. As they approached the door, the sound of laughter, clinking dishes, and Christmas music poured out, bright and welcoming on the surface, just like the family that waited inside. Patricia Rivera greeted them first, sweeping forward in her red sequin sweater, cheeks rosy with effort rather than warmth. She kissed Vanessa's cheek lightly before squeezing Daniel's hand a little too long, as if anchoring him. Inside, relatives filled the living room. Uncles, cousins, friends of the family, everyone chatting over pecan pies, tamales, casseroles, and trays of homemade cookies. It was the kind of Southern holiday gathering people romanticized, all charm and generosity. But Vanessa knew the invisible lines drawn through the room. Who spoke first? Who obeyed? Who held power? And Patricia held all of it. Vanessa kept close to Daniel at first, letting him guide her through greetings and hugs. She tried to settle her nerves. This was Christmas Eve, after all. A night for peace, celebration, togetherness. She forced a small smile as she accepted a cup of hot cider from one of the cousins and slipped her phone from her purse for a moment. A new text appeared. Merry Christmas, Vanessa. Thanks again for the great work this week. Enjoy the holiday. It was from her boss, a quick, polite message, nothing more. But Daniel saw it. His gaze sharpened, something dark flickering across his face before he forced a rigid smile and turned away. Vanessa didn't realize he'd taken it the wrong way. She didn't notice how his jaw tightened, how he stopped engaging in conversation, how he spent the next hour silently brewing in suspicion. The evening moved forward with the usual traditions. Small family toasts, children spilling wrapping paper across the floor, uncles debating football, carols playing from an old speaker. Yet the atmosphere around Daniel shifted. His responses were clipped. His eyes rarely left Vanessa. She approached him twice, asking quietly if he was all right, but he brushed her off each time, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. When the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, the room began to quiet in anticipation of their customary Christmas toast. Glasses were lifted, laughter softened, and for a brief moment, everything seemed suspended in warmth and tradition. Then Daniel reached for Vanessa's wrist. The shift was so abrupt the room seemed to tilt. Vanessa froze as he pulled her toward the center of the living room, the chatter falling away until only the soft hum of the holiday music remained. "Tell them," Daniel said, voice trembling, not with sadness, but with fury held too long. "Tell everyone what you've been doing behind my back." Vanessa blinked, confused. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" He lifted her phone, the message still open on the screen. "This, your little secret, your affair." Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa's stomach dropped. "That's my boss. He sent a holiday message. That's all." Patricia stepped forward, her expression sharp and triumphant, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "If you have nothing to hide," she said, "then you shouldn't fear discipline." She nodded subtly toward Daniel. "Use it. The belt." A murmur swept through the family. Someone whispered Vanessa's name. Someone else looked away, but no one stepped in. Daniel reached for the old leather belt, hanging from a decorative hook, an heirloom Patricia called a symbol of respect and order in the family. He held it awkwardly, almost shaking, waiting, wanting Vanessa to break down and confess something she hadn't done. The world narrowed around her. Her breath caught. Her skin went cold. She stood alone in the center of a room full of people who were willing to watch her humiliation unfold like a show. The belt dangled from Daniel's hand. The music continued faintly in the background. And then, slowly, Vanessa reached into her purse, her face emptied of emotion, calm in a way that chilled the room. She pulled out a small USB drive, and the entire Rivera family fell silent. Vanessa didn't utter a single word. The silence around her was so thick it felt like the air had solidified. She stepped away from Daniel, away from the circle of relatives watching her like she was already guilty, and walked toward the massive flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor, each step measured, calm, deliberate in a way that unsettled everyone. Someone scoffed behind her. "She's going to make excuses now," one of Daniel's cousins muttered. Another added under their breath, "Always so dramatic." Vanessa didn't react. She didn't turn. She didn't tremble. She reached the TV stand, knelt briefly, and inserted the USB into the side port. The small blue light blinked to life. A few relatives chuckled nervously. "Really? A presentation? Oh, this I've got to see." Daniel stood frozen in the center of the room, the belt limp in his hand. His anger, now confused by the strange calm radiating from his wife. Vanessa pressed play. The laughter died instantly. The first frame appeared. The Rivera living room. The same hardwood floor, same rug, same sofa, only several feet from where the family stood now. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Someone whispered, "Wait, that's this house." Then the footage moved. Patricia Rivera entered the frame, followed by Michael Turner, not sitting, not talking, touching. Her hand rested on his arm. His hand slid along her waist. They leaned into each other, too close, too comfortable, far beyond anything innocent. Then he kissed her neck, slow and familiar. And Patricia responded as though this was something she had done many times before. A woman near the back screamed. Lauren's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Daniel's grip loosened and the belt dropped with a heavy slap against the hardwood. Vanessa remained still, watching the family around her instead of the screen. She didn't need to look. She had seen these videos too many times while deciding whether to show them. The shock she saw now mirrored her own from weeks earlier. On screen, Patricia crawled into Michael's lap, laughing breathlessly, her hand sliding through his hair. The camera angle shifted slightly as the two sank deeper into the couch. It was intimate. It was obvious. It was unmistakable. No. That's not. This is edited. Patricia shrieked suddenly, voice cracking as she stumbled forward. Someone manipulated this. "Vanessa, you liar. You evil girl, this is fake." But the room wasn't listening. Michael appeared again in the next clip, shirtless this time, kissing Patricia with a hunger that made several relatives turn away in disgust. The timestamp clearly showed multiple different days, multiple visits, multiple betrayals. "This can't be happening," Lauren whispered, sinking to her knees as her sister-in-law reached for her shoulder. She shook the comforting hand off, eyes locked on the screen with horror. "That's my husband. That's my husband with my—" Her voice broke, and she covered her mouth to muffle the sobs clawing out of her. Patricia was falling apart, mascara streaking down her cheeks, hands trembling wildly. "Turn it off. Turn it off right now. Daniel, make her stop. She's destroying our family." Daniel didn't move. His face had gone pale, eyes wide, mouth slightly open like he couldn't catch his breath. He stared at the TV as though seeing his mother for the first time in his life. Every ounce of righteous fury he'd felt minutes earlier collapsed into confusion and shame. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, shouts, accusations, crying gasps. Children were pulled out of the room. Uncles argued about what to do. Aunt Sophia fainted onto the couch. Someone grabbed Pastor Raymond, asking him to intervene. Someone else asked why Daniel ever believed Vanessa. Chaos swallowed the Rivera household. And in the center of it all, Vanessa stood completely still, her expression unreadable. as the truth she had carried alone finally tore the family apart. Weeks before Christmas Eve, before the shouting and the USB and the shattered illusions, the memories were quieter. Thin threads of discomfort Vanessa kept brushing aside. They came back to her now with sharp clarity, each one fitting into place, like puzzle pieces forming a picture she wished she could unsee. It started subtly. Patricia had always been attentive to Michael, her son-in-law, but lately there had been a softness in her tone whenever she addressed him, a warmth that felt out of place. Vanessa remembered one Sunday afternoon when the family gathered for lunch. Everyone sat around the long dining table, passing dishes of roasted vegetables and cornbread. Patricia set a plate in front of Michael with a smile gentler than any she had ever offered Vanessa. "I made your favorite again," she said almost shyly. Michael grinned, tapping the edge of the plate. "You always spoil me, Patricia." The comment should have been harmless, but the way they exchanged that lingering glance, a small, secretive moment no one else seemed to catch, sent a brief flicker of discomfort through Vanessa. She tried to ignore it. Holiday stress, she told herself. Overthinking. Nothing more. But it continued. At another family gathering, she found the two of them in the kitchen, laughing at an inside joke she wasn't part of. Patricia stood oddly close, her hand resting lightly on Michael's upper arm as she teased him about something. Only the two of them understood. Their laughter was too familiar, too synchronized, as though they had spent much more time together than anyone realized. When Vanessa stepped into the room, both of them straightened abruptly. Patricia dropped her hand. Michael cleared his throat. The air shifted with a thick, awkward silence. Vanessa smiled politely, pretending she hadn't noticed anything at all. It was easier that way. Then there was the incident at the grocery store. Vanessa and Daniel had run into Michael by chance, and Patricia, who had insisted on joining them for the errand, lit up as if she had been waiting for him. She abandoned the cart and hurried over, touching Michael's chest lightly as she fussed about how thin he looked and whether he was eating properly. She adjusted his collar, smoothing it with both hands, an intimate gesture disguised as concern. Vanessa glanced at Daniel, expecting him to notice the oddity, but he only chuckled. That's Mom, always mothering everyone. Except she didn't mother everyone. She hovered over Michael alone. Later, in the car, Vanessa mentioned it gently. "Do you think your mom is overly affectionate with Michael?" Daniel frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "She just seems close to him, more than usual." Daniel laughed as if she'd told a ridiculous joke. "Come on, Nessa. You know how she is. She loves him like a son." He dismissed it so quickly that Vanessa felt foolish for even bringing it up. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she was too sensitive. She let the thought sink beneath her daily routine, swallowing her instinct like a bitter pill. But the signs grew harder to ignore. Patricia began complimenting Michael in pointed ways, calling him dependable, attentive, such a strong man. Her eyes softened when she spoke to him, and she often found excuses to sit beside him at family dinners, leaning a little closer than necessary, laughing a little too brightly at his comments. Every time Vanessa looked up, Michael was already watching Patricia, or Patricia was already watching him, and then they would both look away as if caught. Vanessa couldn't explain why those tiny moments unsettled her so deeply. She only felt the truth of it in her body, in the tightening of her stomach, the heaviness in her chest, the instinct whispering that something was wrong beneath the polished surface of the Rivera family. Still, she forced herself to dismiss it. These were Daniel's people, his traditions, his home, and she loved him. So she told herself she was imagining things. Because the alternative, that her mother-in-law and her sister's husband were entangled in something twisted, was unthinkable. At least it was then. It became harder to ignore once Lauren began traveling more frequently for work. Her job sent her to conferences across the state, sometimes for days, sometimes for an entire week. And every time she was gone, Michael somehow ended up at the Rivera home. Invited, expected, welcomed with an enthusiasm that didn't match the explanation Patricia gave. "He hates eating alone," Patricia would say with a dramatic sigh, as if hosting her son-in-law nightly was a charitable act. And besides, family takes care of family. But the dinners she prepared for him were anything but ordinary. Vanessa would come over with Daniel after work and find the kitchen filled with the smells of slow-cooked brisket, homemade enchiladas, freshly baked cornbread, all dishes Patricia never made unless it was a special occasion. And she always placed Michael's plate first, always added an extra serving, always hovered over him with warm glances and questions about his day. Michael played along easily, sliding into the household dynamic as though he belonged there more than in his own home. He helped Patricia carry dishes, teased her affectionately, and sat beside her at the table as if it were his rightful seat. The two of them shared long conversations during dinner, punctuated by soft laughs that felt too private, too familiar. Daniel noticed nothing, or pretended not to. "Mom just hates quiet dinners," he said once, shrugging off Vanessa's concern. "And Michael's practically family already. What's the big deal?" But the big deal came late one Thursday night. Vanessa had woken around midnight to get a glass of water. The Rivera house was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. She padded toward the kitchen, but as she passed the long corridor leading to the bedrooms, she froze. Soft giggling drifted through the dim hallway, light, breathy, playful. Patricia's laugh. A moment later, a low murmur answered her. Michael's voice. Vanessa's heart slammed against her ribs. She moved slowly, quietly, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. As she approached the end of the hallway, the sound of whispers grew clearer, mixed with the unmistakable rustle of movement behind Patricia's cracked door. Then the hallway light flicked on. Michael stepped out of Patricia's bedroom, blinking against the sudden brightness. His shirt was wrinkled, half tucked into his pants, the top buttons undone. He froze when he saw Vanessa, standing just a few feet away. They stared at each other for a beat too long. "Oh," he said finally, clearing his throat. "I was just talking to Patricia about something." He didn't finish the sentence. His voice faltered. Before Vanessa could speak, Patricia hurried out behind him, her robe tied hastily around her waist. Her hair was slightly mussed, cheeks flushed in a way Vanessa had never seen before, not even during the busiest holiday gatherings. "Vanessa," Patricia said with a brittle smile, "what are you doing up, dear?" "I couldn't sleep, so I asked Michael to help me fix a squeaky drawer. Nothing to worry about." A squeaky drawer. At midnight, in her bedroom. Vanessa stared at the two of them. The tension in the air was thick, clumsy, and so obviously wrong that her breath felt caught in her throat. Michael adjusted his collar, avoiding her eyes. Patricia's hands trembled as she tightened the knot of her robe. For a long moment, none of them moved. Vanessa forced a nod, turned away, and walked back to the guest room, her heart pounding in a sickening rhythm. She didn't sleep that night. She lay awake replaying the scene, the giggling, the whispers, the bedroom door, the wrinkled shirt, while dread wrapped itself around her spine. Her instinct wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong. Patricia's birthday had always been an event, one of those meticulously planned Rivera traditions where every detail was orchestrated to her liking. That year was no different. The dining room was decorated with shimmering gold streamers, floral centerpieces, and a cake so extravagant it looked more suited for a wedding than a family gathering. Relatives filled the house, voices overlapping in a warm buzz of celebration. Vanessa tried to match the energy, though something tight and uneasy kept tugging at the back of her mind. She and Daniel had chosen Patricia's gift carefully, a delicate pearl brooch they'd spent weeks finding, something elegant and meaningful. When the moment came for Patricia to open it, Vanessa watched her closely, hoping for even a flicker of appreciation. Patricia opened the box, glanced at the brooch, and forced a thin smile. "Oh, how lovely," she said, her tone flat, unimpressed. She set it aside almost immediately, as if it were an afterthought. Vanessa's heart sank, but she kept her smile steady. Then Michael handed Patricia his gift. Vanessa didn't see what was inside the box at first, only saw Patricia's face transform. Her eyes brightened, her lips parted in a gasp of delight, and she pressed a hand to her chest as if overwhelmed. "Oh, Michael," Patricia whispered, voice trembling with emotion. "You remembered." He laughed softly. "Of course I did." She pulled him into a hug that lingered too long, her fingers curling into the back of his shirt. Relatives clapped, assuming it was simply a touching family moment. But Vanessa felt something twist inside her chest. Daniel leaned toward her, whispering, "Mom just loves thoughtful gifts. Don't take it personally." She nodded, pretending to understand, pretending she didn't see how Patricia held Michael's hand a moment longer before letting it go. Pretending she didn't notice the way Michael smiled back at her with a familiarity that didn't belong between a mother-in-law and her son-in-law. The evening carried on with cake and toasts, but the heaviness in Vanessa's stomach grew. She excused herself to get some air and stepped into the quieter hallway, grateful for the brief silence. As she started to return to the living room, she noticed Patricia slipping down the hallway toward her bedroom, phone pressed to her ear. The older woman moved quickly, glancing back once to make sure no one followed. Instinct pulled Vanessa forward on light feet, keeping herself hidden behind the corner. The bedroom door didn't close all the way. Through the small gap, she heard Patricia's voice, soft, breathless, tender in a way Vanessa had never heard. "I wish you were here tonight," Patricia murmured. "You make me feel alive." Vanessa's breath caught. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Then another voice came through the phone. Low. Familiar? Unmistakable. "Michael." "Soon," he whispered. "I'll come by later. I miss you." Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. She felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. The air seemed to drain from the hallway as her heart plummeted, heavy and cold. Her hands trembled violently, and she gripped the wall to keep herself steady. Patricia laughed softly, a girlish, intimate sound Vanessa had never imagined coming from her mother-in-law. "Don't make me wait," she said. It was the kind of tone a woman used with a lover, not a son-in-law, not her daughter's husband, not in any world that made sense. Vanessa stumbled back, her mind screaming that it couldn't be true, that she must have misheard, that there had to be some explanation, any explanation that didn't lead to the horrifying conclusion clawing at her throat. But she knew that voice, she knew that laugh, and she knew the truth in her bones. The denial she had clung to for weeks cracked wide open, spilling dread into every corner of her chest. Something was wrong, something was broken, and something was about to shatter beyond repair. Vanessa didn't make the decision lightly. It wasn't impulsive, and it wasn't driven by jealousy. It came from something deeper, an instinct she could no longer ignore, a tightening in her chest that refused to let her sleep, and the echo of Patricia's whispered words that haunted her days and nights. So the next week, on her lunch break, Vanessa drove to an electronics store on the far side of town, somewhere no one in the Rivera Circle would ever think to visit. She walked past aisles of laptops and TVs until she reached a display of home security devices. Her hands felt unsteady as she picked up a small, discreet camera with night vision and motion alerts. It looked like part of a phone charger, innocent, unremarkable, something no one would question. She paid in cash, using money she had quietly set aside over the last year. Money she originally planned for a weekend getaway with Daniel, something to reconnect, to rebuild, but now felt like her only lifeline to the truth. That weekend, the Rivera house emptied out for a cousin's baby shower. Daniel insisted they didn't need to attend for the full day, but Patricia had pulled him aside with a sharp whisper about family responsibility, and he eventually caved. Vanessa pretended she needed to finish some office work before joining them. Daniel kissed her cheek and reminded her not to take too long. When the last car pulled away and the house finally fell silent, Vanessa stepped inside with the small camera tucked in her purse. Her pulse hammered, but her movements were steady. She walked to the living room, the place where most of the strange closeness had unfolded, and scanned for an outlet near the side table. Perfect. It would blend seamlessly. She plugged it in, waited for the tiny indicator light to blink twice, then synced it to a secure app on her phone. The lens was barely visible. No one would suspect a thing. As she looked around the empty living room, the weight of what she was doing hit her. Spying on her own family, installing surveillance in her mother-in-law's house. She felt sick, but she also felt something else, resolve. She left the Rivera home before anyone returned, the secret camera humming quietly in the corner, watching. The first night, nothing. The footage showed Patricia watching TV, Daniel scrolling on his phone, a cousin dropping by to return a dish. Normal. Ordinary. Vanessa almost convinced herself she was wrong, that she'd let paranoia consume her. But on the second night, the camera caught movement after midnight. Vanessa opened the alert in bed, under the covers, so Daniel wouldn't see the glow of her phone. Her breath hitched when Patricia walked into the frame wearing the same blue silk robe she'd seen days earlier. Seconds later, Michael entered the room. He wasn't supposed to be there. Lauren was out of town. He had no reason to come. Vanessa's blood turned cold. They exchanged quick words she couldn't hear, but their body language said everything. Patricia stepped close. Michael leaned in. Their hands found each other as naturally as breathing. Then Patricia placed a hand on his chest, sliding her fingers down slowly. Michael cupped her cheek. Their foreheads touched. They whispered. They kissed. Not a polite kiss. Not a mistake. A practiced, intimate, lingering kiss. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the sound rising in her throat. Tears blurred the screen, but she wiped them away, forcing herself to keep watching. Because they didn't stop. Clip after clip, recorded on different nights, revealed moments that stripped away every excuse, every ounce of denial she had clung to. Patricia curled into Michael's arms on the couch. Michael pulled her onto his lap. They tangled together in ways that made Vanessa's stomach twist with heartbreak and nausea. They whispered like lovers who believed the world would never catch them. Explicit scenes followed, scenes Vanessa could barely bring herself to watch, scenes that confirmed everything. This wasn't new, wasn't accidental, wasn't a moment of weakness. It was an affair, ongoing, reckless, shameless, carried out in the heart of the Rivera home. Vanessa sat frozen on the bed, shaking violently. She felt grief. She felt betrayal. She felt disgust so sharp it made her hands go numb. But beneath all of that was a painful clarity, a quiet voice saying, "You needed to know. Now you do." With trembling fingers, she downloaded each clip. Then she backed them up onto an external drive. Then another. Then a cloud folder with a disguised name. By the time dawn crept through the window, she had every piece of evidence saved in multiple places. Her heart was breaking, but her mind, cold, focused, painfully lucid, was done pretending. The living room was still shaking from the explosion of Patricia's secret when Vanessa returned fully to the present. The USB presentation had ended, but its impact lingered like an earthquake. So many faces pale, so many lives cracked open. Patricia was sobbing uncontrollably in a corner. Lauren sat frozen on the couch, staring at nothing. Michael had vanished down the hallway. The family muttered, whispered, argued, splintering into small, frantic knots. And Daniel was no longer the man who had dragged her to the center of the room minutes earlier. He was crumpled on the floor, hands in his hair, breathing hard as the reality of what he had done sank in. When he looked up at her, his eyes were red, wild, terrified. "Vanessa, please," he whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know what they were doing. I thought," his chest heaved. "I thought you should have told me. You should have said something." She stared at him, calm in a way she hadn't expected. Her hands no longer shook. Her voice no longer trembled. Something inside her had snapped into place, firm, solid, unmovable. "I did tell you," she said softly. "I asked questions. I tried to talk to you. You didn't want to hear it." Daniel crawled forward on his knees, grabbing her hands desperately. "I was wrong. I messed up. Baby, please, please don't leave me. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, talk to Pastor Raymond, anything. Just don't walk away from us." As if summoned by the words, Pastor Raymond stepped through the crowd. His voice was gentle but firm, dripping with that heavy tone of practiced authority. "My children, this is not the way," he said, raising his hands. "This family has suffered a terrible shock tonight, but breaking the marriage will only deepen the wound." He looked at Vanessa with a sympathetic smile. "Forgiveness is the foundation of unity. Come now, take a breath. Let's pray together. Let's remember that a home without forgiveness can never know peace." But Vanessa had never been clearer in her life. "No," she said. The room froze. Pastor Raymond blinked, startled. "My dear, pain can cloud." "No," she repeated, steady and calm. "Forgiveness isn't the problem here. Abuse is." Daniel made a wounded sound, like someone had struck him. "Vanessa, no, please." She gently pulled her hands from his. "The moment you raised that belt," she said quietly, "was the moment our marriage died." The words hit Daniel so hard he physically flinched. He grabbed her again, clutching her wrists like a man drowning. "I didn't mean it. I wasn't going to actually do it. Mom pressured me. You know how she is. She gets into my head." Vanessa stepped back, forcing him to let go. "I'm not staying in a house where discipline is violence. I'm not staying with a man who would humiliate me in front of his entire family because of a text message from my boss." Her voice softened, almost sad. "You chose her over me, again and again, and now I know what she was really doing while you defended her." The weight of that truth made Daniel collapse fully, hands pressed to the floor, shoulders shaking. "Don't leave me. Please. I'll change. I swear I'll change." But she already knew the truth. He was only sorry because he'd been exposed. Vanessa turned, her movements steady. She walked past the shattered circle of relatives, past Lauren's broken stare, past Patricia's collapsing pride. She went to the guest room and pulled out her small suitcase, the one she'd packed quietly over the last few days as her suspicions sharpened. She zipped it shut. When she walked back through the hallway, Daniel tried to stand, but his legs buckled beneath him. He reached out a trembling hand. "Vanessa, don't go." She paused only long enough to meet his eyes. "I'm choosing myself," she whispered. Then she walked out of the Rivera house, the cold December air hitting her face like a rebirth. She stepped off the porch, gripping her suitcase tightly. Her entire body trembled, shock, adrenaline, heartbreak. But beneath it all was something new. Freedom. For the first time in months, maybe years, she could breathe. She kept walking. Vanessa had always imagined divorce as something slow and tangled, a process that dragged on for months or years, with endless arguments and court filings. But when she sat across from attorney Melissa Carter 2 days after leaving the Rivera house, the reality was startlingly simple. Melissa watched the recorded footage without blinking. She took notes calmly, professionally, but the tightening of her jaw said enough. "This," Melissa said, closing her laptop, "is not just adultery. This is prolonged, deliberate, and humiliating conduct in the marital home. Under Texas law, this gives you significant leverage." Vanessa nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. We'll proceed on grounds of cruelty and fault-based divorce, Melissa continued. Given what your husband attempted to do with that belt, paired with this evidence, we can argue for an unequal distribution in your favor. Vanessa didn't want revenge. She didn't want to destroy Daniel. She only wanted fairness after years of gaslighting and dismissal. She wanted closure, safety, freedom. The video ensured Daniel had no room to fight. When he was served the papers, he didn't even try. The humiliation of Christmas Eve had already broken him. By the time mediation rolled around, he sat slumped in his chair, answering questions with hollow apologies and trembling hands. Patricia's affair had detonated their family from the inside, and Daniel no longer had the energy or the pride to resist. The settlement finalized in just under 6 weeks. Unusually fast for a Texas divorce. Vanessa received her share of assets, half of the savings account, her car, and a modest but meaningful alimony arrangement. Melissa called it a clean win. Daniel didn't argue. He signed every document with his head down. Meanwhile, the Rivera family collapsed like a structure eaten from the inside. Lauren left Michael within days. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She simply arrived at their apartment with an empty suitcase and told him it was over. Michael begged, tried to deny it, then swore he'd been manipulated by Patricia. But the footage, those unmistakable whispers, those touches, left no room for excuses. Lauren moved in with a friend. She blocked Michael's number. She told her siblings she didn't want to see anyone for a while. Michael didn't take it well. He spiraled in a way that scared even his extended family. First came the drinking, heavy, reckless drinking that left neighbors calling the police twice in a single week. Then the bar fights. Then the DUI. The last anyone heard, he was facing court-mandated rehab and possible jail time. He had lost his wife, his reputation, his stability, everything tied to the illusion that had once propped him up. But Patricia's collapse was worse. The powerful, controlling matriarch of the Rivera family didn't just fall, she shattered. In the days after the USB footage went public among relatives, she stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped speaking altogether. Her sisters found her pacing the living room at dawn, muttering to herself, clutching a rosary so tightly her knuckles turned white. One morning, Lauren found Patricia sitting on the front porch in her robe, rocking back and forth, whispering Michael's name over and over. She didn't seem to know where she was. Within a week, Pastor Raymond and Daniel had her evaluated. The clinicians recommended inpatient care. The diagnosis was a stress-induced psychological break with dissociative features. She was admitted to a behavioral health facility on the outskirts of Houston, somewhere quiet, surrounded by trees. Daniel became her only caretaker. He visited her daily, spending hours in the sterile waiting room while she drifted through cycles of confusion and despair. He took over her bills, her medications, her insurance paperwork, everything. Watching his mother unravel under the weight of her own betrayal broke something in him. He stopped shaving, stopped going out. He lost weight, lost sleep, lost every ounce of the arrogance he once carried so confidently. Relatives whispered that the guilt was eating him alive. He feels responsible for everything, one cousin said. He thinks if he had listened to Vanessa earlier, another murmured. For the first time in their marriage, Daniel was alone, truly alone, with no mother to shield him, no wife to comfort him, no illusion to hide behind. Vanessa didn't celebrate any of it. She didn't savor their downfall. She simply watched from the distance she had earned, recognizing that justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it simply unfolded. Quiet, inevitable, irreversible. Vanessa chose a small apartment on the edge of Sugarland, a quiet space overlooking a line of pecan trees and a narrow walking trail that caught the morning light. It wasn't big. It wasn't luxurious. But it was hers, every square foot earned through pain, truth, and the courage to walk away. The first night she slept there, Surrounded by unopened boxes and the hum of unfamiliar air conditioning, she realized she wasn't afraid. The silence didn't hurt. It soothed. She spent the first week rebuilding the small routines of her life piece by piece. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets twice, trying to figure out where things felt most natural. She bought new linens, soft gray sheets, pale curtains that let the sunrise drift gently into the room. She created a morning ritual. Brew coffee, open the balcony door, let the Texas warmth roll in. Some mornings her hands still shook, the echoes of Christmas Eve creeping back. But the tremors came less and less with each sunrise. Work became steady ground. Her coworkers, once just colleagues, grew into quiet points of support. They didn't know the details, but they sensed enough to offer kindness without pity, coffee on her desk, invitations to lunch, the sort of gentle presence that didn't crowd her healing but accompanied it. Vanessa found herself smiling more, even laughing in meetings. The weight in her chest loosened. At Melissa's suggestion, she started therapy. The first session left her trembling, tears slipping down her cheek as she tried to describe a marriage that had slowly stripped her of her voice. But the therapist, soft-spoken, patient, grounded, helped her untangle each memory without shame. Week after week, Vanessa felt the fog inside her begin to clear. The nightmares gradually faded, replaced by longer stretches of uninterrupted sleep. Her shoulders no longer felt permanently lifted, braced for the next emotional blow. She joined a beginner's yoga class at a studio 5 minutes from her apartment. The first day, she felt strange, out of place, unsure of herself. But the instructor greeted her warmly, helping her adjust her posture, encouraging her to breathe deeply. The movements were gentle but powerful, and by the end of that first class, Vanessa felt something inside her unlock. She kept going, twice a week, then 3 times, finding peace in the rhythm of breath and stretch, the slow rebuilding of strength. On weekends, she explored the community, a farmer's market downtown, a small art festival by the park, a women's support group that met in a coffee shop every Thursday evening. She didn't talk much at first. She listened. But eventually, she began sharing pieces of her story, carefully, cautiously, and found mirrored experiences in women she'd never met before. Their honesty stitched something back together in her. She rediscovered old hobbies she'd forgotten she loved. She painted again, small watercolor pieces of sunrises and riverbanks and wildflowers that she taped to her refrigerator. She cooked for herself, trying new recipes, savoring the simple joy of seasoning food the way she preferred, not how Patricia insisted every dish should taste. She bought herself a pair of running shoes and started walking the trail behind her apartment, the evening breeze brushing against her skin like a quiet reminder that she wasn't trapped anymore. There were still moments when her breath hitched, passing certain neighborhoods, hearing certain songs. The memory of Daniel kneeling, begging, haunted her sometimes. The image of the belt in his hand flickered in her mind unexpectedly. But she learned how to breathe through it, how to ground herself, how to let the fear pass without taking root. And under all of it, beyond the healing, the rebuilding, the quiet routines, was a new clarity. For the first time in years, she wasn't performing, pleasing, or shrinking herself to keep peace in a house that never truly accepted her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel watched, judged, or second-guessed. She could open her own door. She could fill her own home. She could choose her own life. Vanessa stood on her balcony one warm evening, watching the sunlight melt into shades of amber and rose across the sky. She placed her hand over her chest, felt her heartbeat, steady, calm, her own. For the first time in years, she breathed freely. Vanessa kept only one copy of the video, not out of spite, not out of a desire to hold power over anyone, but because part of her believed that unfinished truth had a way of circling back when it needed to. She tucked the drive into a small box in her dresser, beneath folded scarves, and tried not to think about it again. Months passed. Life grew lighter, quieter, softer. Then, near the anniversary of Daniel's late father, a date the Rivera family treated with reverence, Vanessa felt something settle inside her. Not anger, not resentment, just a sense of something unfinished. Daniel's father had been the one steady, compassionate influence in his life, the only person who could challenge Patricia's control. His death had left Daniel adrift in his mother's shadow, and somewhere in Vanessa's healing, she realized the truth. Daniel had never learned who he was without being told, without being shaped, without being controlled. But none of that excused what he'd done. Vanessa wasn't trying to save him. She wasn't trying to punish him. She simply wanted the truth to reach him at the right time, when he had no illusions left to cling to. So she drove to the small church where Pastor Raymond held weekday office hours. The parking lot was empty except for his car. She walked inside with calm footsteps, the USB tucked carefully in her purse. He looked up from his desk in surprise. "Vanessa, it's been some time." "I didn't come to discuss forgiveness," she said softly. "Not in the way you think." She set the USB on the desk. Pastor Raymond frowned gently. "You kept a copy." "One," she replied. "For this." He sighed, recognizing the weight of what she was asking. "I don't want a confrontation," Vanessa continued. "I don't want him to call me. I don't want to relive any of it. I want you to show him this privately. On the anniversary of his father. He listens to you. He always has." Pastor Raymond nodded slowly. "You think it will help him heal?" "I think," Vanessa said, "it will finally make him see." She walked out without looking back, feeling no triumph, no fear, just a strange, quiet resolve. 2 weeks later, Daniel watched the video. Pastor Raymond didn't describe the moment in detail. He only said Daniel sat through the clips in complete silence. No denial, no excuses, no deflecting, just breaking. When the final frame froze on the screen, Daniel lowered his head into his hands and sobbed. Not for the first time, but for the first time with clarity. He saw the cruelty of his accusation. He saw the humiliation he'd inflicted on Vanessa. He saw Patricia's betrayal with sharpened edges. He saw how he had chosen the wrong person to defend, the wrong person to trust, the wrong moment to raise a belt. He sent one final message. Only 2 words. "I'm sorry." Vanessa read it once. She didn't reply, not because she hated him, but because she no longer belonged to that chapter of her life. She had healed in places he could no longer reach. She had grown in directions he would never understand. Silence was not punishment. It was closure. Life moved forward in gentle, unexpected ways. Vanessa met someone months later, not during a dramatic moment, but in the softness of everyday life, at a community event her yoga group hosted near the river. His name was Marcus Reed, a quiet man with kind eyes who listened more than he talked and carried a calm strength that felt nothing like the turbulent world she'd escaped. He asked her questions thoughtfully. He never interrupted. He laughed easily, welcomed silence without discomfort, and treated her boundaries with respect that felt almost startling. Their connection grew slowly. No rush, no pressure, no shadows of the past. They cooked together on weekends. They walked the trail near her apartment. They went to local concerts and small art fairs. Their relationship unfolded gently, like something meant to last. Marcus never tried to fill old wounds. He simply offered space where new life could grow. And Vanessa let herself grow. One warm summer evening, she stood again on her small balcony, watching the sun dip behind the pecan trees that had become her quiet companions. The breeze brushed against her skin, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and distant barbecue. She leaned into the railing, arms relaxed, heart steady. She was free, not because she had escaped something dark, but because she had reclaimed something bright. Her own life, her own voice, her own future. Vanessa closed her eyes, letting the peace settle into her bones. The story that once defined her pain had finally found its ending, and she was living the beginning of everything that came next.